You just got an email from Johnny's mom, and she wants to talk to you. Let's talk about it.
You're listening to That Music Podcast with Bryson Tarbett, the curriculum designer and educational consultant behind That Music Teacher and the Elementary Music Summit. Each week, Bryson and his guests will dive into the reality of being an elementary music teacher and how music can truly be transformative in the lives of the students you serve. Show notes and resources mentioned in this episode can be found at thatmusicteacher.com.
Welcome back to this week's episode of That Music Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about that shared feeling of dread when the music stops and you have to make that call or pull a student aside or deal with all kind of the unpleasant things about being a teacher. This is one of the most anxiety-inducing parts of teaching, and it can take a huge toll on teacher well-being. On top of that, it can be really easy for us as music teachers to kind of be outside of the system of who would expect to have these conversations. So sometimes we get even infighting from teachers that feel like, well, why did you call Johnny's mom instead of talking to the classroom teacher? You should have talked to me first. And yeah, sometimes we can, but we're teachers too. So let's talk a little bit about how we can have these difficult conversations in a way that says our piece, makes it as actionable as possible, and gives a little bit of a framework so that it's not this anxiety-inducing thing every single time. We're going to be using the CALM approach, which is a simple 4-step framework to ensure that when you're going into these conversations, you're being prepared, you're professional, and you're focused on solutions so that you can move everything forward. So let's dive in. So the CALM framework, CALM. First step, we have C, collect the facts. This is all about being prepared. First of all, if there's something that goes on, never call when you are angry or frustrated. Never send an email, never do anything. Just take a moment, pause, and gather the information, the objective data, not feelings, facts. Think about the different specific observable behavior you're talking about. If Johnny's doing X, Y, Z, what are you seeing? Don't put any flavor onto it. What is actually observable in your classroom? And figure out how you can frame that issue without emotion. For example, on 3 separate occasions this week, student X left the group space after being asked to stay, which resulted in lost instructional time. That is a fact. That is there's no emotion attached to that. It's not saying Johnny was XYZ. This is what happened. And whenever possible, I want you to have some positive things to say too about the student ready to go. Start the conversation whenever possible with a positive observation to establish goodwill. And honestly, this is done even better if you're reaching out about these positive observations when there are no negative things to share. You're just establishing a positive line of communication with families. So C is all about collecting the facts. A is for aiming for collaboration. Your goal here in this conversation is not to assign blame, but to partner for student success. I want you to shift your language from you need to fix this to how can we make this happen? How can we work together to support this student in making better choices? And I know that sometimes can be hard because sometimes you just want to look at somebody and shake them and say, yo, get it together. But that's not the reality that we live in. So whenever we can say, what can I do? How can I support the student? What can I do this? And sometimes you might not like the answer, and that's not saying you have to do the answer. But whenever you can frame this as, I want to work together with the student. I want to work together with you, the parent. I want to work together with you, the classroom teacher, to figure this out, rather than this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm going to do. It's done. Whenever we can aim for collaboration, that's really helpful. Presenting the issue as something that is happening to the student's learning rather than a personal affront is really helpful. So for instance, when this happens, the student is missing instructional time rather than, when this happens, I get really upset. Which one of those is going to be more impactful? Let's be honest. So we have C, collect the facts. A, aim for collaboration. L is listen and limit. When you're having these conversations, do more listening than talking. Say your piece. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying just listen to it. But sometimes people just need to be heard, and be ready to have those conversations and let them be heard. But also say what you want to say. Have your piece. That's why the collecting the facts is really important, because you're coming in prepared. A great way to do this is after that you present that factual concern that you collected in step 1, Ask an open-ended question like, what are you seeing at home that might be contributing to this? Or what are some strategies that you think might work best for this student? Asking these types of open-ended questions can be really helpful in creating dialogue because a lot of times these miscommunications can happen because there isn't any dialogue. And a really big part in here is it's not just listen, it's listen and limit. Limit the length of the conversation. These types of conversations do not need to last 30 minutes the majority of the time. State your goal, show the facts, agree on a couple of actionable steps, and set a time for you to follow up later. Don't need to be these big drawn out things because when that happens, that's when things can get a little dicey and things can get away from you. Keep it as actionable as possible, listen to their concerns, but also share what you're seeing in your classroom. And our last step is M, moving forward with an action plan. Do not end the call without a clear, actionable next step. So I want you to explicitly say something like, all right, our next step, and when moving forward, I'm going to be using a visual clue in class. If you'll talk to your student tonight about XYZ, I'll email you a quick summary about how it goes, and I'll check back next Tuesday. And always follow up if you say you're going to follow up. Follow up with the student, the parent, the classroom teacher, the administrator if they're looped in. Consistency in doing what you're saying you're going to do is one of the most powerful tools for behavior change. Now, let me address some elephants in the room. I fully understand that as specialists, we see hundreds of students each day. It can be really hard to find the time to do this. And this is where I think it's really helpful to utilize a team if you have one. If you have homeroom teachers that are willing to have some of these conversations for you and or with you, that can be really helpful because they might have a little bit more information or a better rapport with these parents than you might have. Um, Looping in administration can be helpful. It could also not be helpful. But let's also not get beyond the fact that because we don't get to see the students all day or, we only get them for a limited time, we really need to make sure that our observations are objective and specific. We want to make sure that we're framing our terms and how the behavior impacts the learning in the classroom, keeping it back, bringing it back to a student-centered reason why this is a problem. Now, here's another thing I really want to recommend you doing is documenting your efforts. Whenever you have one of these conversations, just write down, even just throw it in your calendar, who you talked to, how long you did, what was it about, what was the outcome. It's a great way that you can kind of keep a track of what's going on. So if something were to get blown out of proportion or need to be escalated further, you're not going in with, well, I thought, or I think we did this. No, here are the things that we've tried, and it still hasn't worked. Also, let's be honest, this type of approach is just really good for dealing with people. So while this episode was kind of more focused on how we as music teachers can have these difficult conversations with parents or grown-ups or families, I really think there are some cases where this is exactly what's going to be needed between you and a classroom teacher, between you and a colleague or with an administrator. And I think this is a really good framework of how we can make it actionable, how we can make it specific, and how we can pull emotion away from it a little bit so that we can really focus on the root of it rather than how that makes things feel and how that kind of blows things out of proportion sometimes. Now, what I am not saying is to be a pushover. What I am not saying is that you need to be a sponge and soak up everyone's problems. What I want you to hear is that using a framework like this can allow you to say your piece, hear the other opinion, and move along with an actionable plan. So it's not just people yelling or talking at each other. There's something that's going to happen. And that action, for me at least, is what helps my anxiety when I'm in these conversations. I hate having negative phone calls with families. Least favorite thing I've ever done in my career is call home and tell a parent that a student was not meeting expectations, especially on some of these bigger reasons why. But they're important because we need to hold our students to expectations and we need to involve families in a lot of these conversations sometimes so that it's not just us versus the world. We can be on a team, at least sometimes. I also want to be really clear that having these conversations isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of professionalism and a commitment to standing up for what you believe in. And if a student isn't meeting those expectations, don't just let them get away with it. Have these firm boundaries, have these different things. Don't be a jerk about it, but say your piece. Tell them what it's about. Tell them like, hey, this ain't it for me. Use that. But having a soft framework like this can help you do it in a way that is a little bit less anxious, anxiety fulfilling, and it allows you to remain a professional along the way. With that being said, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of That Music Podcast. It would mean the world if you would leave a comment wherever you're watching or listening, or leave a 5-star review. That really helps us grow in the algorithms and all those fun things. With that being said, I know it's January. I know you're busy, so I'm going to let you along your way. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for making a difference in the lives of the students.